Hello, welcome to Divided Nexus Pet Stories YouTube channel. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy the video.
This is the story of Crackers and the mission to Mars. The cockpit of the Seeker 1 was a masterpiece of miniaturized engineering, a gleaming sphere of titanium and glass no larger than a grapefruit. At its center, nestled in a custom-molded gel seat, sat Crackers. He was a Syrian hamster of unremarkable coat but remarkable spirit, his whiskers twitching in rhythm with the cooling fans of his life support system. Outside this tiny sanctuary, the world was a cacophony of metal and fire, a towering pillar of human ambition designed to hurl a single ounce of courage into the void. The countdown began, a synthetic voice vibrating through the floorboards of his capsule. To a human, it was a sequence of numbers. To Crackers, it was the low, rhythmic hum of destiny. He adjusted his tiny paws on the control nubs, his dark, bead-like eyes reflecting the blinking amber lights of the console. The air grew heavy with anticipation, the very molecules of the cabin seemingly tensed for the violence of the coming ascent. Then, the world shattered. When the engines ignited, it wasn't just a sound. It was a physical weight that pressed Crackers deep into his gel padding. A roar like the grinding of tectonic plates rose from below, shaking his tiny frame until his very teeth felt loose. He felt the crushing hand of gravity 4 times what he had ever known, flattening his fur and making every breath a Herculean effort. Earth was no longer a home. It was a jealous giant trying to pull him back. As the rocket tore through the thickest layers of the atmosphere, the sky outside the reinforced porthole transitioned from a brilliant cerulean to a bruised purple, and finally to the absolute, unforgiving ink of space. The violent shaking smoothed into a steady, rhythmic pulse. Suddenly, the pressure vanished. The heavy hand of gravity lifted, replaced by a disconcerting, magical lightness. Crackers drifted upward against his restraints, a single stray sunflower seed floating past his nose like a tiny, golden satellite. The silence that followed was more profound than any noise. In the weightless environment of the habitat ship, Crackers unbuckled his harness with practiced dexterity. He floated to the main viewport, his tiny paws pressing against the cold glass. Behind him, the Earth was no longer a sprawling landscape of fields and forests. It was a marble of swirling white and deep indigo, glowing against the darkness. He watched, unblinking, as the only world he had ever known shrank until it was nothing more than a pale blue dot, lonely and fragile in the distance. The journey across the void lasted months, a period of profound solitude that would have broken a lesser creature. Crackers kept a rigorous schedule, running for hours on his magnetic levitation wheel to keep his muscles from wasting away in the low gravity. The wheel didn't squeak, the engineers had seen to that, but the soft patter-patter of his feet was the only heartbeat in the vast emptiness between worlds. He was a pioneer in a cage of stars, navigating the vacuum with a quiet, rodent dignity. During the long nights, he stared at the red spark ahead. Mars grew from a distant point of light into a rusted shield, its scarred surface becoming visible through the ship's telescope. Crackers often thought of the laboratory back in Houston, the smell of fresh cedar shavings and the taste of chilled broccoli. He didn't feel fear. He felt a strange, cross-species responsibility. He was the vanguard for every dreamer who had ever looked upward, carrying the hopes of a world on his small, furry shoulders. The ship's AI began the deceleration maneuvers as they entered the Martian gravity well. The quiet of the cruise was replaced by the hiss of thrusters and the groan of metal under heat. Crackers returned to his seat, cinching the straps tight. The red planet rushed up to meet him, a landscape of ancient craters and dried riverbeds that looked like the veins of a giant. The heat shield began to glow, turning the view outside into a swirl of crimson plasma as the ship bit into the thin Martian air. The descent was a frantic dance of physics. The parachute deployed with a violent jerk that sent Cracker's stomach into his throat. Below him, the dusty plains of Plana Mostrail rose with terrifying speed. The landing thrusters fired in short, sharp bursts, kicking up clouds of iron-rich dust that obscured the sensors. The Seeker 1 bucked and swayed, a tiny metal seed looking for a place to take root in the sterile soil. With a final, bone-jarring thud, the ship settled. The engines cut out, leaving a ringing silence that felt heavier than the roar of takeoff. Crackers sat still for a long moment, his chest heaving, listening to the ticking of the cooling metal. He reached out and tapped the command to depressurize the airlock. A hiss of escaping gas signaled the meeting of two worlds, the recycled oxygen of Earth mingling with the thin, cold whispers of Mars. The outer hatch groaned open, revealing a horizon of burnt orange and butterscotch skies. The sun was a small, brilliant coin, casting long, sharp shadows across the dunes. Crackers unlatched his seat and drifted toward the opening, his specialized pressurized suit a shimmering fabric of silver weave clicking as he moved. He stood at the edge of the ramp, the wind of a billion years brushing against his whiskers through his helmet's intake. He looked down at the pristine, untouched surface. For eons, this dust had known only the wind and the shadows of passing moons. Now it awaited a visitor. Crackers took a tentative step forward, his heart drumming a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He felt the grit of the Martian regolith beneath his boots, a sensation entirely alien, yet strangely grounding. With a final, decisive movement, he stepped off the ramp and onto the red soil. The dust gave way slightly under his weight, recording the passage of a living thing. He looked back and saw it, a tiny, five-toed impression, perfect and clear in the rust-colored dirt. It was the first footprint, the first paw print on a world that had waited for a billion years to be touched. Crackers stood tall, his tiny shadow stretching long across the crater floor. He wasn't just a hamster anymore. He was a bridge between the stars. He looked up at the sky, where a tiny blue speck was just beginning to rise over the horizon. He let out a soft, triumphant chitter, a sound that carried no distance in the thin air but echoed through the history of exploration. The mission was a success, but for Crackers, it was just the beginning. He turned his gaze toward the distant mountains, his whiskers twitching with a new curiosity. There was a whole world to explore, and he had plenty of seeds packed away for the journey. One small step for a hamster, one giant leap for every creature that ever dared to look up and wonder what if. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe for more content, and until next time, stay super.